Okie doke. The only problem with Zoom is that I really struggle to see if people put their hands up or if they make a comment. And some of the things you might ask I might have covered in it, so it might be good if we maybe hold them till the end. And then we've got an opportunity to ask them at the end of my discussion and Rhiannon's. So we're here today to talk about the pre-registration eating, drinking and swallowing competencies. And how they relate to you as a practice educator or how they relate to your practice educators. My name is Kathleen Graham. I'm a speech and language therapist by trade, and I joined the RCSLT in October, specifically to work on this project. And there are 3 streams to this project. It's supporting the competencies and implementing them, developing simulation resources to support the competencies, and developing communities of practice for their maintenance. So where the project came from was Health Education England decided to fund plans to incorporate eating, drinking and swallowing competencies into the pre-registration training. There's a lot of information about the background I don't want to go into in detail. I want today to be a really practical, sort of hands-on experience, but there is more information on our webinars if you want to understand the background to it. Okay. So what are we expecting these graduates to be able to do? So key date is 2026. Okay, so that's a calendar year 2026. So any learners graduating before 2026, it's kind of business as usual. They will still most likely need to complete their post-basic course, but they will have a portfolio document that they bring into their workplace. If you have students coming from a HEI that's currently working to the 2014 kind of ABC level competencies, they will still continue to have the students coming out at a level C, and we'll be reviewing what level they come out at after 2026. After 2026, they have to achieve the competencies and the hours component to be able to graduate. So it's a condition of their graduation. There are a couple of exceptions to that, but they're few and far between. So for example, BTU have got a 6-year part-time course, and we couldn't have started this back in 2020. They will also have this audit style document so that shows which competencies have been signed off, hours they've achieved, how the hours have been split. And what we would expect is that they would be mentored, supervised in line with the role of a band 5. So there are 20 competencies altogether, and the learners need to achieve 16 out of these 20 competencies. I'm not going to talk about each of them in detail. What I will do is this presentation will be put up on our Basecamp, and it's got the links in it then to the competency documents, so you can download them and read them at kind of your own time. There are other things you would expect around eating, drinking and swallowing. So, you know, being able to talk to the person that's got the difficulties, knowing what normal looks like in an oral facial assessment, being able to evaluate oral facial swallowing from people that have EDS problems. And they go all the way up to being able to identify safeguarding concerns or discussions associated with EDS. So here you will have, this is the link for the full document, so that gives you the background and the rationale behind the competencies. And here is the sign-off sheet. So as a practice educator, or for your practice educators, this is the main document that they will use. So I've taken a screenshot of just the first few competencies that are on it and what it looks like. So in some form, your student will come to you with a document like this. Each competency needs to be signed off twice, okay? So for example, discuss the importance of eating, drinking, swallowing, and the service user's goals with the service user, family, or carers, okay? So you might have your student observe you do that. and then you get them to attempt part of it during the next session. I think not quite there yet, they've not quite achieved it, but you could sign them off as developing it, okay, with the date. And maybe towards the end of the placement or after a few people, they've managed to actually achieve this and be able to a really good case history for and discuss that important eating, drinking and swallowing problems with them. So we sign it off, date it, that's great. If they manage to do it twice within your placement, so 2 separate occasions, they've done really well, if you've seen evidence of this, you can sign off both of them. Okay, so this goes through 1 to 20 of the competencies, and there's a little key to sign at the bottom just to be able to keep it. There's also an hours component to the competencies, so overall they have to achieve 60 hours, 30 of which need to be direct with an adult client and 10 need to be with a paediatric client. There will be on the document that we just looked at, the sign-off document, we're making adjustments to that so that we can incorporate the hours component on it as well, so that we've got that kind of low level of paper-based document that you can use if you don't choose to use any of the other resources that we have. We decided to split it and specifically identify experience within the paediatric population, because we know that often it's somewhere that gets underrepresented. We know we have a large workforce in it who are approaching retirement age, and we really want to try and future-proof the profession and make sure we get people interested in paediatric eating, drinking and swallowing and how their career might develop into that area. What I wanted to work through was some examples of what you could sign off on some sort of typical placements, and I've divided it into a dysphagia or an EDS trained therapist and a non-EDS trained therapist. So for the dysphagia trained therapist, there are a certain number of the competencies that we recommend that they're done face-to-face. Now, face-to-face is quite a loose definition of this, so it could be digitally, face-to-face over Zoom or Teams. And also some of the digital resources that we're making, those can be counted as kind of face-to-face opportunities as well. And these are the things that you would expect, you know, being able to apply health and safety, you know, are they wearing their pinny, gloves, mask, goggles, whatever is recommended within your service? Have they got good hand hygiene, those usual kind of things? Okay. In the competencies, there are 3 further ones that are suggested. They could be face-to-face, but don't necessarily have to be, okay? So that would be great if you can sign them off in a placement, but it's not the end of the world if you can't do that. We've got other ways that we can do that. So, a bit of an imaginary example here. So we've got Priyanka, who's a dysphagia trained. Imagine she's just got a community code. She works with adults with swallowing and communication problems. And she's due to have a 2nd-year placement, peer placement, and they're going to be with her 1 day a week for 8 weeks. What I've done is broken it down into the 8 weeks and what you might be able to sign off at each point. So week 1, they come in, the usual introduction to the service, directing them to the local policies and procedures that they follow, and Priyanka gives them the names of a couple of clients that she's going to see later and asks them to go through the clinical records of those clients to gather some relevant information. What she wants them to do then is, while she's doing the swallowing assessment, can they try and fill in their local swallowing template? So can they make sense of what she's doing, why she's doing it, and ask them to think about, you know, with all this information, what is your reasoning? What's your hypothesis around this person's swallowing? She asks them to practice using the template at home, and then that they're going to use it with a new client the following week with Parkinson's disease. Okay. So again, 2nd week, she's got some new clients to review the case history. And what she wants them to do then is complete that local swallowing template whilst Priyanka is observing them and guiding. So they carry it out, and then Priyanka interprets the information and feeds back the results to the clients, while still asking the students to try and think about a hypothesis. What is it that you see in? What ideas are you formulating in your head? What's that underlying impairment that we're seeing? And she asked them to think about possible sort of management or rehabilitation interventions that might be suitable for the client for the session. Week 3, exactly the same as week 2. So week 4, she's saying we're going to review some of the clients from week 1. Again, to direct the learners to some local policies and procedures, looking at the service spec. So, for example, if that was a stroke ESD service, kind of how long we keep them on for, the frequency and intensity of intervention, what the demands of the service are, what would trigger a client review, kind of those day-to-day things that would impact on your management of your caseload. She wants the learners to reflect on a client-centred review and to complete the swallow review and reviewing their management and rehab goals with the client. Okay. Then week 5, everything goes wrong. Okay, what's your plan? Doesn't go to plan, and one of the clients that they saw in week 2 is massively deteriorated and she needs to go out to see more. Okay. So Priyanka asked them to think about why it is that she's prioritised this person for review for today, and asked them to look at the notes and figure that out. They observe Priyanka doing the review and they talk about those signs of oral and pharyngeal dysphagia, and it prompts a discussion between them around non-oral nutrition, hydration, and for this case, and sort of the risks and benefits for it. Okay. So then by week 6, they need to prepare some reviews, some swallow reviews for a couple of clients in care homes with advanced dementia. So Priyanka's there and observes. So sorry, she's not there and observes. She's videoed in. She observed them doing it. So that saves her a little bit of time. And they're given that independence to direct the session, but knowing that they've got that long arm support there to be able to do it. And the nurses in the nursing home have also got someone there that they can reference. So unfortunately, during the session, they're gathering information from a senior care assistant who says that one of the residents had a choking episode earlier on toast. So the learners reiterate the recommendations that they were supposed to be on, so a level 6 and a 0, so toast wouldn't be in that. That they needed one-to-one supervision, hand-over-hand support. And then they discuss that with Priyanka, and then she looks to see what further action can be needs to happen. So it could be a safeguarding, and discusses the process. Week 7, very similar to week 6, and week 8, the placement educator, the placement exam occurs and the tutor videos in. So sounds busy, sounds like a normal kind of busy student placement. So at the end of it, what can Priyanka actually sign off? Okay. So there's 15 of the 20 competencies that she's seen them do, and as long as they're competent in doing them, she can sign them off for those. She's totaled, just with the direct contact hours, 19 hours and 15 minutes. So for those adult clients, these 2 students would only need a further sort of 10 hours worth to achieve their 30 hours. So I want to give an example of a non-EDS trained therapist and what you could sign off. So I identified these as sort of the main areas where a non-EDS trained clinician might be able to sign off the competencies. One is looking at health and safety relating to someone who is at risk of EDS. So thinking about carrying out your oral facial exam, what health and safety procedures do you put in place? Gathering information from the case history that will guide the interview. Detailed background information from the case notes, and carrying out an oral facial exam on a population without eating, drinking and swallowing difficulties. We've got a bit of an example for this one. So Abby's a paediatric therapist who works in a community clinic. just with children with communication difficulties. He doesn't see children with swallowing difficulties. And he's got a first-year student on a week's placement for 4 days. So day one orientates them into the setting, and he explains to them what's going to happen the day ahead, what assessments he's going to use, what local case history he's got, and asks them to try and complete it online while he's doing it. Discusses the oral facial exam he uses and asks the learner if they would be willing to do it with 2 clients the next day. So the next day, Abby talked a little bit about health and safety requirements to see clients face to face, and the learner is able to complete then 2 oral facial exams on clients who don't have EDS problems and has adhered to all those health and safety procedures. Then Abby says, can you familiarise yourself with the case history form, and tomorrow I'd like you to do it with 2 clients. Now, as part of the case history form, it has that developmental history and it has general questions about, does this person have any eating, drinking, swallowing problems? On day 3, they're completing the case history form with 2 clients. So one of the clients says they're a little bit worried about their child, they'll only eat beige foods, they're losing weight, they're really pale. So Abdi gets to discuss with the learner the referral process to their paediatric eating, drinking, swallowing team. And luckily, his paediatric EDS team will accept referrals like this. The learners asked them to review referral information and case notes for a new child that's coming in and complete a case history and oral facial assessment. So you can imagine this is by no means far away from what we'd be asking students to do regularly on a placement. So for Abdi, at the end of the placement, what can he sign off? Okay, so we've got competencies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and altogether he's done almost 3 hours worth of paediatric face-to-face work. So what I wanted to talk to you about is recording these competencies and how you do it and what we are doing. We're developing an online log has got 2 parts to it. So it's based on the NQP online diary. We've made adaptations that there's a section which records the hours component. So it will record how many hours are spent pediatric, adult or indirect, so that the student can get an overview of that. And the student is able to update which competencies they've had signed off. Now, each HEI is different in how they get the information out to the educators. So we're working with each of the HEIs to look at what suits them. Okay, so please refer back to your individual HEI as to how they want you to complete that. Some it will be electronic sign off of a PDF. Some it will be a physical paper sign off, and I'm working with PAIR to try and get it integrated into their system as well, but just contact them for sort of local instructions on how to sign it off. So what are we doing at the RCSLT to help? So a big part of my role at the minute is developing an online e-learning programme, which we're really hopeful will be ready to go live by September, the absolute latest. Within that e-learning programme, we will have some extended video case studies broken down into really clear sections with examples of real clients, both paediatric and adult, with eating, drinking and swallowing difficulties. It's divided into pre-assessment, assessment, management and discharge, and even within that it's broken down further. So for example, reviewing the case notes, the therapist talking about how you take the pertinent information out of the case notes. Within that then, there are the 4 extended case studies. We're hoping there will be 2 adult and 2 paediatric, and then we will have 2 assessments, 1 adult and 1 paediatric. A very similar format to the case histories, except we won't have that discussion from the therapist explaining the rationale. So we're working on that at the moment, and we're just signing people up to the video case studies, and we're making really good progress with them. What we'll also be doing is developing our communities of practice to look at the documents that we need to to help implementation of this. And the documents that we've been told so far would be really helpful would be a list of example activities. Sorry, Joe, can you still hear me? Sorry, something came up saying I wasn't signed in. That's why I went a bit quiet. Yeah, we'll be developing a document that's got examples with each competency. It's not an exhaustive list, but it will give you some examples of what a learner can do to achieve the competency while they're with you on placement. We're also looking at some employer and employee expectation documents. So when these learners graduate, what should you expect of them and what should they expect of you, particularly in terms of their supervision and working with an appropriate level of clients at a band 5. I meet regularly with the HGI to try and work through any problems that we're having with it or other things that we can do to try and support implementation. I'm more than happy to attend local practice educator events. I've done quite a few so far, but if you want me to come to your local event, please just get in touch. I'm more than happy to do that. We've developed a lot of online guidance through the website, and we've just had a little bit of a revamp of our website, so it's a lot easier to find. And we're reviewing all our current documents and updating them. This project has been done at speed, so we want to make sure everything's still relevant and appropriate as we move on. So, does anyone have any questions, examples of what they're doing that's working well? Feel free to put it in the chat now if you want to. I can see the chat now. Or you can save it till we go into the breakout rooms, that's absolutely fine.
I think it's just a lot of information to try and think about, isn't it? And I think we're all at different points in that. As a paediatric therapist that doesn't do dysphagia, I think I'm still getting my head around where my role sits and how I can facilitate that and which bits I can facilitate. And then obviously from an HEI perspective, it's, are we teaching everything? What simulation can we draw on if students don't get those hours? So I think I'm still in the days of trying to work out where I am on that journey and what's left to do. I don't know about other people, but maybe others feel similarly.
Yeah, and it's something very new, and it's a different way of working than we've done before. So we know there will be, you know, bumps along the road. But if there is something, please just get in touch with me, because if you're thinking it, you will not be the only person. So I placed it last month, paediatric dysphagia therapists. I did a mini training session for them at the beginning, which really helped. Thank you, Kelly. So yeah, Kelly's just said she did, so she's paediatric therapist, EDS therapist. And she did a mini training session for them at the beginning, which really helped. And that's great. And one of the things we're hoping with the e-learning is that actually it will kind of warm them up for when they come to you on placement, so they'll come at a much higher level than they would have done previously. And there will be a lot more theory that they're doing at university as well. Victoria.
Hi, yeah, I'm coming from a HEI perspective in terms of how we can support students across the 3 years, how we can kind of start introducing EDS and achieving competencies from the beginning and or at least providing the foundations, like you say, about the knowledge and how to do that. I think my question is about how we can easily track that. You know, obviously you've got your sign off in terms of developing and met, and if you're trying to do that across 3 years and perhaps you're on a placement and the student gets to a point of developing but not met, it's that kind of consistency of who signs the met bit off if it's part achieved in another capacity. These are just my thoughts. I'm not an EDS trained therapist, so if it sounds that I'm speaking from a non-EDS background professionally. But yeah, it's that, and how we can evidence activity that doesn't necessarily lead to complete sign-off, but that that can contribute to the hours and the progression in learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and Rhiannon can tell me I'm wrong here, but I know what she's done is if you can say, if you've got that student in front of you and you give them, for example, okay, can you do this orofacial assessment with this person without EDS difficulties? And the therapist goes, yep, that was all good. They've done it. They can sign off no matter whether it's said, sort of developing or not. So they can do that final sign off as one of the sign offs for them. Sort of in terms of measuring and marking progress towards them, I think that's probably where the hours component comes into it. So we will have on the bottom of that sign off document where you have kind of your client group, what you've done, number of hours you've spent with them, and that's why the whole project has got those two arms to it, so the hours and the competency, so to make sure you've got that spread of exposure, but also that you're able to do each of those things. Yeah, I think a lot of it is, and Angela's just sort of messaged, and it is a little bit of sympathy at the minute. We're very much, as Judith would say, we're building the ship, we're building the plane while we're flying it, and we're learning what works well and what doesn't, and how we're changing things as we go along, and that we do have a little bit of time. The students and the 3-year undergraduates, so it'll be September 23 when the first year start, will have to have this at the point of graduation. We've got that little bit of leeway to play with. And I think what has worked well for some pieces is that early implementation of it so that you can learn before it counts. I know it's difficult for you because you've only got first years at the minute.
Yeah, but we are trying. We have completely done that, and we've sent them out on placement with a bit of an activity log, just to see what they come back with in some respects, and also so that we're not so that they have the same opportunities that students will have in 2 years' time. It's that kind of we want to make sure that they have an equal chance of acquiring those skills on the way. We appreciate that clearly it's a evolving and changeable picture, but alongside that, we need to, we're willing to learn too. It's just, I think that was kind of how do we measure that from the beginning, because it kind of is about meeting and achieving, but yeah, the hours and that progression rather than being nearly there to met. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying. Jo, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. Just to say, really, I'm so pleased that those 2 documents that you mentioned about examples of each competency, I know we've had a conversation about that. I think that will be so helpful for us all, just to think, okay, that means that, or that we can apply that in that way. So I'm super pleased, and thank you for promoting that for us, and also the employer expectations, because I think that's really important, isn't it? That as with any NQPs, we would expect them to have significant supervision in their first year. RCSLT guidance is weekly at first, isn't it? And then moving forward based on the NQP's abilities. But that's still it's going to be a steep exponential learning curve, isn't it? But I think that's really important. And I just wondered if you might say a little bit more about the kind of simulation opportunities in university and how that links in with the placements, because that's felt quite reassuring, I think, for us, that some of the competencies can be signed off in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So within the HEI, so particularly with COVID, all of a sudden the students couldn't come on placement for a lot of them, and quite quickly a lot of the HEIs had to develop something that would replace placements and have a simulator experience within the universities. And they've done really, really well to look at this, and each HEI has taken on in different forms. So some places are looking at kind of having these study weeks or these practical days where we have practice educators who are EDS trained who come in and might do a little bit of a talk, do practical sort of sessions where we can look at possibly patient actors and things coming in and working in that open model of where a student can learn to take a case history but in a really supported environment. There's lots of opportunities around sort of high-tech stuff and live streaming. So live streaming from clinical situations into the HEIs, and particularly for some of the things that you might not get the opportunity to see on placement, so things like fees or video fluoroscopy, that actually if you can work with the HEIs to live stream it into a session and you've got a cohort of your students there, then that's absolutely fantastic. You know, you're making sure that everybody's had a chance to look at that sort of instrumental side. But yeah, I think just work with your HEIs. They are going to be signing off some of the competencies as well. It's very much going to be a joint endeavour to work towards this. And similarly with the e-learning that I talked about, that you know, you can use it when the students are out on placement with you. So it could be for half a day a week, that you actually direct them to the resource and they work through that and then come back to you with the questions that they have, so that they're getting more out of the placement and it's freeing up your time a little bit. So I think definitely that joint working with the HEIs is really, really important. So Catherine, sorry, had just asked around the level of training that the universities are offering. So apart from the competencies, there's a knowledge section of these which I haven't included on the slides. So that's a section that details for each of the HEIs what they need to cover within their curriculum to be able to prepare the students to achieve these kind of sign off of the competencies. So each of the HEIs has done a gap analysis for us, and we've looked at kind of which of the areas are they struggling to meet within their current curriculum. Is it in the right order to be able to allow your students to get the maximum sort of exposure that they require? But I can send that information across. I can put it as an attachment onto Basecamp. Sorry, Mary, did you have your hand up?
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi.
So I'm working at University of Lincoln, and I'm writing the programme. It's not running yet. There's lots of opportunities to involve simulation, and I'm just interested to know to what extent simulation of different sorts could be used as face-to-face hours and where it can't.
This is a bit of a discussion that we've been having actually around it, because we've agreed that the cases on the e-learning we can use as face-to-face, but we haven't really delved any deeper into it. But we think the simulation, if you're holding a simulation day, for example, that where you're practicing doing assessments with patient actors, that would count as face-to-face time as well. And I think it's kind of flipping placements on their head a little bit and thinking about them in a different way. So, you know, we take the old model of, you know, a student following us around the hospital and not really getting very close to the patients. Actually, their learning could be so much better if they're in a safe environment where they can stop and say, I need to ask a question about this. Like, for example, the safeguarding competency. really hard for a student to bring that up on placement. But if you've got a scenario set up within the HEI that describes, okay, we've got this mum and the speech therapist has recommended that the child can be moved on to normal food, but she insists that she's given the child pureed food because she's really worried about the risk of choking. Working through with them and as a group, you know, is that safeguarding? What do we need to do first of all? How do we reduce that anxiety with the parents? Which, if you were in that situation, that would be really hard for you to work through. And even as a practice educator, quite hard to devote time that needs to. And I think our learners are really good at coming up with really good examples of how they can work with people to achieve these things. I'm just aware of time. I'm just going to move on to Rhiannon because I think it's really, really important to get the practice educator's point of view on this. So without further ado, Rhiannon, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Okay, can you see that, everyone? Yep, lovely. Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Rhiannon and I'm clinical lead speech therapist for the adult acquired service in Delft, which is in northeast London. And we're now running our second intensive dysphagia placement. We ran our first last summer. So I'm the clinical lead for a community adult acquired service. We offer a full dysphagia service, so clinical swallowing assessments, management therapy. We have a community-based fee service. We run our own videophoropscopy service, and we have a joint endoscopy service with the local ENT department. Caseloads that we cover include stroke, progressive neurological conditions, head and neck cancer, dementia, respiratory, and any other acquired disorders that crop up. And the settings that we're working in are community clinics, home visits, and community hospital settings. So background to our placement, I think same as for everybody up and down the country, the pandemic left our team with multiple challenges, not least a backlog of cases to be seen. And some real difficulty providing services into our local nursing and care homes. There were lots of issues with not having external people going in, and then with regular outbreaks of COVID preventing us from going in when we were planning to. The need to support the future workforce by increasing the placements that we were offering as a service. And also long-standing recruitment challenges and the readiness of newly qualified therapists to join the workforce, especially as it relates to eating, drinking and swallowing. And obviously we're wanting to support the wellbeing of our clinicians. So we set up a quality improvement project to increase the provision of student placements, but it was critical for us that those placements should improve the quality of care that we were providing, and that we should be able to support clinical wellbeing. So these additional placements should not result in a significant increase in the burden on our clinicians who are already dealing with so much going on at the moment. So as far as the dysphagia placement is concerned, the placement aims were that we should support students to develop competencies in dysphagia in line with the new pre-registration eating, drinking and swallowing competencies. We wanted to increase the support we provided to our local nursing and care homes. We wanted to increase placement provision, but in order to support wellbeing of our staff, support the service, we wanted to make sure that all the placements we were delivering gave back something to the service, that we got something out of it as well as the students getting something out of it. We wanted to plan the placements in such a way that it balanced the load that was placed on the clinicians. And we're very aware that our placements often lead to future recruitment. So we often end up recruiting people who have been students with our service. I think that's mirrored up and down the country. So we really had a vested interest in making sure that the students that we had would be closer to full dysphagia competency, so that if we then end up offering them a post, we've got less training to do when they join us as a Band 5. So in terms of looking at some of how we delivered some of those aspects of the placement, I thought I'd start with balancing the load, because I think as teams, as clinicians, this is the big issue, is the burden on our clinicians. They're juggling so much, there's so much going on, and it can be really, really challenging. So the way we designed this placement was quite different to how we've traditionally gone about placements. So we shared the responsibility for the placement across the whole team. So myself as a Band 8, I'm the overall placement educator for the placement at the moment. I sign the students off at the end. I've been crucial in designing the placement and in organising it each time. Our Band 6s and 7s, across a 5-week placement that we're offering at the moment, offering each 2 to 3 days of face-to-face dysphagia practice, which they felt was workable under the current circumstances. One of our Band 6s is working on a QI project around nursing home training. So he's providing supervision to the students around provision of that training. And we didn't want our Band 5s to be left out, but we did feel that their level of dysphagia competency is not yet at the point where we can ask them to be actively training students face-to-face. So instead we asked them to develop peer-supported learning tasks for the students, so they were involved as well. We also then looked at using a blended range of learning opportunities for the students. So rather than, as Kathleen was referring to, the traditional placement model where you just have a couple of students that kind of tag along with you all the time, we really planned it out as a timetable with different learning opportunities that balanced out the amount of face-to-face versus sort of student-led learning that was going on. So we have various pieces of peer-supported learning that we've developed, and they also have a theory session in FEES and VF. They come and observe our instrumental clinics. They are gradually trained to independently provide dysphagia training to nursing homes. And then they have the fully supervised face-to-face practice with patients. So this is an example timetable. So last summer we did a 3-week block with a couple of students, and this is their timetable. So the darker grey is sort of your placement admin, if you like, the start, the finish, the in-between. The pale pink is peer-supported learning, where the students are working independently on tasks that we have sent them. The light grey is around nursing home training. The slightly greeny colour is them coming to instrumental clinics, and then the purple is the actual face-to-face going around with a clinician working through your competencies. So there's a real balance compared to traditional placements. There's a real balance of how much they're working independently versus working with one of our clinicians directly. Sorry. In terms of the peer-supported learning that we set up for them, we looked at areas where we felt that students might benefit from more theory to practice support before getting face-to-face with patients. So the training that we deliver to nursing homes is a program called Swallowing Matters, and we had already set up a narrated PowerPoint video for use as an e-learning tool. So the students have access to that from the beginning of the placement, and they're able to watch it as often as they like and familiarise themselves with the content. That helps them obviously in terms of preparing to deliver the training themselves, but it also is dysphagia training, so it contains information around the signs and symptoms of dysphagia, best practice in supporting people with eating and drinking difficulties, and how to support people with eating and drinking difficulties in dementia and at the end of life. So there's a lot of dysphagia know-how within the training itself. We then have a section on IDSI, and we give them the thickener, and they do the flow tests and work out the different thicknesses of drinks and looking at the different texture modification and things. So they have a section on that. Oops. They then have a couple of sections on oromotor assessment, dysphagia therapy and manoeuvres, and that directly links into the pre-registration competencies because they're working with each other, doing oromotor assessments on each other, and they don't have swallowing difficulties. So that already allows them to start ticking off on some of those competencies. We asked them to do a clinical case study, which they then present at the team meeting. So they pick a patient early on in the placement that they've seen, and obviously after gaining consent, they work on that, and they basically do the reverse. So they apply practice, they apply theory to the practice to theory, I can't remember. They take a practical patient and then they look at the evidence base and look at how that patient is presenting, how does it fit with what you'd expect of someone after a stroke or something, what's the management plan, what's the evidence-based rationale for that, and so on and so forth, and they present that back at the team meeting. And then we also have a section on ethics and mental capacity. So this is split into 3 sections. So they have a morning or an afternoon of e-learning from the e-learning for health website, which is mental capacity training, and then sections around supporting people with dementia, supporting people at the end of life, things around wrist feeding and enteral feeding and the like. And then there's a section of mini case studies that they work on and discuss and work through questions on. They're taken from the Royal College website. And then they have one larger case study with a lot more questions that they develop together and then discuss with me at the end of the placement. So in terms of how does the placement give back to our service, how do we gain from it, how do we improve the quality of care? So one big aspect for us is nursing and care home training. So we have somewhere in the region of about 70 care homes that we're responsible for. So we have a never-ending stream of care homes that need training, and we realise that we have a never-ending stream of students that need training in dysphagia, so we thought we'd match them up. So they have the e-learning version that they can use to familiarise themselves with the training programme. They then observe one of our speech therapists delivering the training to a nursing home for 1 session. The next session, the students lead it with our speech therapist watching them. And thereafter, if all is going well, the students are able to provide that training independently to nursing homes. In terms of any questions that may come up, the advice that we give the students is that if they are absolutely certain of the answer to the question, they can go ahead and give it. But if they're uncertain at all, then they should write it down, ask one of the therapists, and then they can always contact the care home afterwards and give the answer to that question. And on this occasion, we have a local apprenticeship programme for carers in our nursing homes that's just started. It's an AHP Champions apprenticeship. And so the students are actually delivering training to the apprentices on that programme. So it's really good. We've got students training students, which I love. And the other benefit to the team is that the peer supported learning that they're doing during the placement can be accessed by members of our own team. So we've got newly qualified therapists in the team who are just starting out with their own dysphagia training. So they've been able to join with the students for some of the peer supported activities around ethics, EDS, fees and VF theory and things. So our own clinicians are developing their skills, and it also provides a really nice variety for the students that they're getting to meet and work with our Band 5 therapists and sort of see where they might be at in a year's time. In terms of how do we work them through their competency, so we use in-house with our Band 5s a modified version of the King's Dysphagia schedule, because we're moving our students from one therapist to another during the placement. So it's not with one therapist. So you haven't got that continuity in that sense. So we need a way of communicating from therapist to therapist about exactly where the students are at any point in time. So this modified version of the schedule stipulates the level of supervision and exactly how many patients should be seen at each level before moving on. And in total, it's roughly about 60 hours worth of face-to-face contact that someone will be doing to complete the entire thing. We also ensured that we added in anything that was missing from the pre-reg competencies went into that schedule, so that as it's signed off at the end of the placement, it's easy to transfer that learning over into the competency document. And what they do is there's a little bit of that, there's an image there. So you can see there's an activity that they have to do. And then where we've got the numbered points, all they have to put in is the initials of the patient that they saw, and then it gets signed off by the clinician at the end of that day. So it's very quick, but it does mean that the next day when they go to a new clinician, that clinician can see exactly what tasks they've done, what they need to do, the level of supervision that they're working at, and can carry the students from there. So there's no going backwards for them, they keep moving forwards. But what that doesn't do is involve any kind of reflection. And it's important that they do reflect. So at the end of each day, they also then are asked to document 3 things that they think went well and 1 thing that they would like to work on for the next day. And that is also then agreed with the clinician at the end of the day and goes forward to their new supervisor for the following day. Practically, we timetable sessions with our most senior clinicians in the final week, and that's to ensure that I get good quality feedback on the level of competency that the students are working at, because it's me that's going to be signing them off at the end. So I want to make sure that if I'm signing them off as competent in something, I can be confident in that judgment. So the most senior clinicians in the team take them towards the end of the placement. And like I've already said, the detail from that dysphagia schedule gives me the confidence in signing off the competencies at the end, and they all sort of match up. So last summer, when we had our first couple of students on this placement, we asked them for feedback at the end. They really enjoyed it. They felt it was very well structured and supported. During that 3-week block, they delivered 3 sessions of dysphagia training to 1 nursing home. They signed off 14 of the 20 pre-registration competencies. I will just say that they came, conveniently enough, with having already done some dysphagia on other placements, and they had been documenting it on the original version of the King's Dysphagia Schedule. So when they started with us, we looked at what had already been done and transferred it over onto our documents. So they were a little bit ahead in terms of where they started. We also looked at the RCSLT traditional A, B and C level competencies just to see where they had got to in comparison to what we might expect of a Band 5. And they managed to sign off most of the level A and B competencies within the 3 weeks. They also signed off their university paperwork. And they achieved in those 3 weeks 19 hours of face-to-face time with patients in their practical dysphagia days, and 36 hours of other learning, peer-supported tasks, nursing home training, observing FEES and VF clinics. They fed back to us that delivering the training to the nursing homes was really useful because it's often something that's on Band 5 job descriptions and person specifications, so it's great to have had that experience. And they were keen to work with us after qualifying, so it worked. Again, what does the team get out of it? They had a good placement experience and were interested in applying to work with our service afterwards. In terms of feedback from staff within the team, they felt the workload of the placement was very manageable. They were really pleased and proud to have provided what they felt was a really high quality placement. And they valued the opportunity to expand delivery of training to our local nursing homes, improve the quality of referrals that we have from those nursing homes. It's something that's a huge and ongoing challenge. So they were pleased with that. And they felt overall the placement was a win-win. And then we asked for feedback from the nursing home that was trained. They felt the quality of the training was good. They would have preferred face-to-face, but we were in the midst of the pandemic, so that was the reason why it was remote. And one of the bits of improvement that they noted as a result of the training was that they said that communication between care staff and kitchen staff around modified diets had improved. In terms of changes to the placement for the future, the students felt that they would prefer to have a 5 or 7 week block rather than 3. They felt they were just getting the hang of assessment when the placement finished. And this placement that we have going on at the moment is a 5-week block. They said they would prefer to have back-to-back days with each clinician to aid continuity of learning. And the clinicians also felt that that would be helpful. So we've tried to ensure that's timetabled this time. They wanted us to find a way to include ethics into the programme. We didn't have that as a peer-supported learning task in the original placement, and it didn't come up as much. We were quite surprised it didn't come up that much when they were seeing patients. So that's where we prepared the ethics programme for the placements for the students this time. And our staff said that if we had longer blocks, we would be able to offer training to more nursing homes within the one block. Also, what we've introduced this time is our students have had the opportunity to attend training in must and food first from our dietetics colleagues. They're also having a dietetics student attend their delivery of the Swallowing Matters programme, so they're helping to train the dietitians, the dietetic students. And they've also had one day working with one of our paediatric dysphagia therapists, which again was also really good, really positive feedback from them about that. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kirsty's messaged me just to say loved it and wants me to put in touch with you. She's had to whiz off. I'm not sure who their hand up first. Nicola, do you want to go first?
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to say, wow.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely amazing. Really well done. That's great.
But I totally agree. She's our little star for EDS. Kelly, would you like to comment?
Again, not a question. It's just to say, wow, this is what we need to aspire to, because I work over in Nottingham, dysphagia, and it certainly gives us a lot of food for thought about how we can actually structure a placement. So thank you.
We have been, so it's all on, like Kathleen said, we're doing, the students that we've got with us are doing a Twitter takeover for the whole month. So they're tweeting every day about what they're doing, and I'm trying to add in from our end some of the resources that we've been using and kind of giving a little bit of scaffolding about how we're doing it. They're tweeting about their experience and I'm trying to give boring stuff. So do have a look at that. Very happy to talk to people about it. I must say, when we first thought of it, it felt daunting, but it felt good. And actually, the reality is that, oh, yay, they're here. Sorry, my students were struggling to get in, but they're here. Just spotted them. So one thing we found is that the effort goes into the planning. And actually, once they're here for the placement, it's nowhere near as stressful, in my opinion, as a student placement often can be. Which is interesting because I feel like we're doing so much more and providing so much better quality in terms of placement. You would think that would translate to more burdensome, but it actually isn't turning out that way, which is really good. I'm very pleased about that. But
Brilliant. Thanks, Rhiannon. Joe, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, just a question. Just sounds amazing, and as everybody said, I was surprised a little bit that given the 3 weeks that kind of resulted in 19 hours face to face.
I was quite strict in how I calculated those hours, so I didn't include time writing notes, time writing reports. It was literally how long are you in front of a patient doing an assessment. I also didn't include things like the fees in the VF clinics, which are face-to-face. I mean, they're in the clinic with the patients, but I didn't include that because they're not getting hands-on in those clinics. So quite how you break it up, I mean, Kathleen would be the expert on that one as to what counts as what, but I was fairly strict when I counted it up, as it was genuinely 19 hours of being in front of a patient with them, and everything else I kind of counted as non-face-to-face, but it could cut different ways. I would say.
That's really reassuring, I think, because yeah, and I guess kind of the examples Kathleen gave earlier, and from a broader perspective, the way that we talk about client-facing hours in terms of the whole practice-based learning arena, that we say anything that relates to a real client. So, you know,
it's face-to-face, yeah, so that it would significantly change those hours.
Potentially, couldn't we? Yeah, which would sound great. And I've got one more question. I'm sorry. Is that all right?
Yes.
You had was it 2 students
at
a time?
Yes. So we had, in fact, it was we were expecting 2 students. That's what we planned for, and we planned the placement as a peer placement. And then in the event, we only got sent 1, but we had a therapist, so a qualified therapist working in the team as an assistant, who hadn't yet started any dysphagia training. So was, in terms of the dysphagia, was working basically, because the student that we had was final year, it was the transition to practice placement right at the end. So they were basically at the same level, if you like. So we put them together so that, because there is so much peer supported work within the placement, it didn't seem right to be asking that student to do it on their own. So yeah, it was our assistant with a student, but they were functionally, they were working at the same level for that placement. And this time we have got 2 actual students.
And with my placement expansion hat on, do you think there's capacity to have more? Could you have had 4 students?
I think that would be harder, because they so where most of our dysphagia assessment is done as home visits, and there's a limit to how many people you can pack into somebody's house. So I think 2 is the maximum at any one time. But I think there's potential for expanding the number of placements in terms of, like I said, the amount of time that any individual clinician is actually having to give to this placement is much less than they might have given in a traditional placement. So you could then, as a team, think about, okay, we're not just going to take 2 students for 5 weeks. We're going to do, you know, 4 or 5 lots of this placement, because actually it's doable for the clinicians, because it's shared across, and there are other elements to the learning in terms of the peer supported learning and stuff that they're doing.
And just thinking about how we potentially use technology now, whether, say, I take your point completely about a client's home, but could 2 students remote into that on an iPad or something as well too?
Potentially. So telehealth is part of the placement, so they are doing telehealth swallow assessments, and we added, part of the modification we made to the King's schedule was that we have a whole section on telehealth and dysphagia that we developed for our band 5s when the pandemic hit. So there's that element in there. It would be around patient consent, I think, and confidentiality and those sorts of issues.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stop hogging you now.
Thanks. I think Mary, I think you were next.
Yeah, Rhiannon, well done. This is fab.
Well, thank you.
Really impressive, and well done to your students. I wondered whether there's anything that's coming out that you're finding that students find particularly challenging, that could do with a little bit more coverage at the HEI's end.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, so far so good, I have to say. The students that we've had have done brilliantly. Yeah, I can't think of anything. Obviously, we have those elements of the placement where we thought they would need or could benefit really in order to maximise the experience when they're face to face with a patient, having them spend time working on oromotor assessments, working on the IDSI, all that sort of stuff means that when they go into seeing a patient, they can get hands-on straight away. You know, the therapist can already say, oh, could you mix me up a level 2? Or, you know, whereas if they hadn't had that kind of protected time to work on that, you'd probably be faced with a level 2. And then the therapist has got to actually do it for them. And, you know, you're kind of trying to do that as you go, and then they don't get as much, they can't get as much out of that one patient appointment, because you're backtracking to do stuff that actually they can prepare in advance and have worked with in advance. So yeah, I suppose if some of that was being done in the HEIs and you knew that, then that you wouldn't have to deliver that on the placement. But...
Thanks, Rhiannon. I think we've just got Sybil, a couple of comments, and then we've got Rhiannon's current students who are just going to give us their perspectives. Sybil, if you want to go next.
Thanks. Hi, Rhiannon. Your last answer might have answered some of this question, so bear with me if you feel like you're repeating yourself. But I'm a dysphagia a therapist who works in Greater Manchester with an adult learning disability in a paediatric population. I'm a split post, and I've just had a student on placement recently, and I tried to think, right, I'm going to be really structured and put in like a video philosophy theory session and all the rest of it throughout the placement. Unfortunately, my student was off for a number of sessions, and I found that it really impacted on my ability to kind of follow through with, you know, because I didn't give her the training that I'd wanted to before I wanted her to do things. And I wondered what your thoughts were around an intensive placement, and whether, you know, 1 or 2 days could have a massive impact, and how we would consider or manage that, because obviously absences do come along.
They do, yeah. I mean, so far we haven't had it happen, but like you say, it does happen. We've had several rejigglings of the timetable this time around. That's mainly been from our nursing homes who've agreed dates and then decided that, you know, they've had issues with their own staffing and decided that they couldn't, and then we had to shift it about and move things around. I think something that has made that easier has been the different peer supported tests. So we've been able to rejig things and just reposition, rather than trying to reposition clinical time, which can be harder because you've got patients pre-booked and it's in the diary, and you certainly don't want to be cancelling and rescheduling patients in that way. Instead, we're just rescheduling those peer supported bits, or the specific day that they're going to come to an instrumental clinic, because we have them, you know, we've got weekly fees and VF, so there's flexibility in that, and that's what we've managed to do this time, is use those peer supported tasks and sort of other elements to kind of rejig the program as we go through, and that's what we've done so far. But I think, I mean, it depends how long someone is off, doesn't it, as to how much of the placement needs to be rejigged. But you're right, when you've got it structured in that way, if someone's off for a significant period, then it is going to affect it.
I think if, like you were saying, that the students are coming to the placement with an understanding of things such as IDSI and being able to have, because that's what I find that I'm doing on placement, and for some of the students in the earlier years, I'm giving that kind of basic information, you know, and then wanting them to work with it. So I suppose if they're already coming to placement with more of that information, it would be easier. I'm a team of, in my paediatric placement, I'm a team of 2. So I think we're one whole time equivalent. So jigging things around is a challenge, but I mean, that's true for all of us, isn't it? So I was just very, there's a fair amount of rejigging you have to do, but there was some key time that I'd set aside to do some, you know, theory with the clinical practicals when I haven't had the time to sit down with them properly. So thank you.
Yeah, but just a couple of questions sort of on the messages. So Emma was just wondering about handover between the clinicians, so the kind of initials and the sign off, and how the clinicians approach it if the students have done a task but they weren't, you know, very good at it, they weren't adequate in it. Would they like decline to sign it, or?
So we don't. So it's me that signs off the competencies at the end, and it's at the end of the placement. And the document that goes from clinician to clinician is our in-house modified version of the King's Dysphagia Schedule. That is a factual document in terms of, you know, the task will say complete an oromotor assessment, fully supervised. And they just put the initials of the patient that they did it with, and the clinician just signs it off, so that you've either done it or you haven't done it. And it's only at the end of the placement that I'm looking at where have they got to. And if they're, and we've got the numbered items of how many patients they've done things with and the level of supervision that they required when they were doing that. And then I've got the verbal feedback from my senior clinicians in that final week about sort of that more subjective feel for where someone is, because there's a document and it's really detailed. It takes you right through from fully supervised to assisting the clinician, to clinicians in the room but you're doing it yourself, to sort of arm's length supervision if you get that far. So you can see exactly as they're progressing through and how many patients they've seen at each level. But yeah, there's then that subjective feedback of, you know, they're really confident with this, that's working really well. You know, there was a curveball thrown in that particular appointment, but they coped with it really well. You know, you get that extra subjective feedback from the clinicians that are with them in the final week to really get an idea already of what you're signing off, and what maybe you might need to leave as a there's a bit more work to be done there.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Lots of comments saying great, really, really inspiring. We will be putting a recording of this up on Basecamp, and we can share Rhiannon's slides and mine as well. And we just had a question around sort of sharing the peer supported tasks, etc. So the things that you've sort of developed. So I know some of them are already up on the RCSLT website. But if there's anything more, I'm happy to share them through me onto Basecamp, if that's okay with you, Rhiannon.
Yeah, it should be fine. I'd have thought so.
Brilliant, lovely. So we're going to hand over now. Thank you very much, Rhiannon. That was really, really great. We're going to hand over to Rhiannon's current students,
Phoebe and Effie,
who are currently. What week are we on now with them, Rhiannon?
Week 3 of 5.
3 of 5, so smack bang in the middle of it. So they've been asked to come and present to a very scary group of speech and language therapists. And we just wanted them to share sort of their experience of it and what sort of worked well for them, or any comments that they had on things. So over to you guys.
Hi, nice to meet you. Nice to see you also. I'm Phoebe and I'm Effie. So we're both at the University of Essex. We're BSc Year 2 at the moment. And like Rhiannon said, we're week 3 at the moment out of 5 weeks. Yeah, so to actually just this morning we've been with one of the speech therapists. So we've been seeing some of the neurology caseload this morning. So a couple of patients with dementia, one with Parkinson's, so a real variety. But what's really great about the placement is that we've had lots of opportunities to sort of experience that range of domains in adult dysphagia. So like neurology, we've seen head and neck cancer as well. We've seen some community frailty, and also had the opportunity to see the VF and the FEES procedures, which has been really, really insightful as well. So it's been really, really good to sort of get a feel for lots of different areas of SLT, and sort of having enough time in each area to sort of really gain an insight into it as well.
And I think as well what's been really useful for us is that we've literally just done our dysphagia module at uni, so the beginning of our spring term. So it's been perfect to kind of have that knowledge and all of that learning in university and then carry it over straight away into like practice-based learning.
Yeah, really able to like consolidate that knowledge through the practical experience. And the pre-reg competencies, which I'm sure Rhiannon has told you about, have really guided our learning as well, and we're able to sort of work our way up with them as well. So like at the beginning of placement it's a lot more observational, and that coincided with like what we were seeing. We were doing a lot more observations, and now we're actually carrying out case histories, oral motor assessments, oral trials, and like with supervision from the SLT as well. So we're really able to like progress through them and like build up our confidence at the same time.
Yeah, which has been great. So that was the King's dysphagia schedule. Yes. So that's like the day-to-day one that Rhiannon was just talking about. So we've been working our way through that, and so I think as well Rhiannon also mentioned that we had a really great opportunity with paediatric dysphagia. So Phoebe was in the morning and I was in the afternoon, just so we weren't there weren't loads of us intimidating and overwhelming the children that we went to go visit in their homes.
Yeah.
In terms of the paediatric dysphagia, that one we were still hands-on, but some of that was more observational. So we were interacting with the children, interacting with the parents, sort of getting basic case histories of their feeding routines and everything. And then the supervisor for that day sort of obviously led the session, but we've been had lots of experiences as well. So with enteral feeding, so some people that we've seen recently with NG tubes, PEG tubes, which has been really great as well to see in a community setting rather than an acute setting, to see how it's managed, and obviously all the ethics side of that, which has been a huge part of the placement.
Oh, it's been massive. Like even just this morning we saw a couple of patients where there were concerns regarding their like mental capacity, and we've done some training earlier this week about that, and really looking at like the Mental Capacity Act, and looking at when it's
you know, best to use someone's best interests, or whether to refer to their next of kin or their power of attorney. So it was really great because we already had that knowledge from the self-study, and we were able to carry that over into actual patient experiences as well. So that's been a really good part. Yeah, so I think overall it's really fantastic, and we feel very lucky to have been given this placement, and that it's so good for us, and as well, like we've heard from Rhiannon, it's great for the practitioners, speech and language therapists as well. It really works both ways.
Yeah, I think as well, so what we've been doing is we've been having 2 days with one sort of area, so 2 days neuro, 2 days head and neck, which has been great because we've been able to obviously do the things of that day and then do some self-reflection on our strengths and areas for development, so then we can, obviously we'll be carrying them over through the duration of our placement, but working on them in particular during that time with that supervisor at the time, and see how they think we've made any sort of improvements from one day to the next. Yeah,
that's been really good. And I think we're both very interested in adult dysphagia as well. I know for me it's my first adult placement. My previous one was a community peds placement, so it's been great to have this as a first placement experience for adults and for adult dysphagia, because like there's so many opportunities to sign off competencies, to, you know, actually do assessments and feedback to patients and like the care staff and their families as well. Yeah. So it's been really fantastic. Yeah.
I think as well we wanted to quickly touch upon the swallowing training that we've been doing with the nursing home. Yeah. So at the moment we've just carried out one of them, but we've got some more timetabled in for the last few weeks of our placement, and I think that's been interesting for both ends because we're able to gauge the understanding of nursing homes. So I think it's very varied from home to home, their awareness of IDSI levels, and just so carrying out a swallowing diary and how important it is for referrals.
Definitely.
But yeah, so they've been really interesting to carry out and do. Looking forward to doing the next few ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because we're both at the University of Essex, so one of the only challenge really has been like the travelling, because we're both based in Colchester, and of course the placement is in East London. So, and of course because we're learning so much and getting so much good experience, I think having to travel back at the end of the day has been a little bit tiring and a little bit for us to get used to, but definitely not taken away from any of the placement at all. That's just.
No, not at all.
That's just
and
how far we've
I think as well, sorry.
No, fine.
The thing to emphasis for us is how much support we've had on this placement, and how great all of the clinicians we've been working with are, that they're really focused and motivated to help us work through our competencies.
Really encouraging, so saying like, oh, do you want to do this in the next appointment? What do you feel comfortable with? Just really
what other things have we got to work through?
Exactly. So really taking into account like how we feel about it, our confidence levels, but also pushing us a bit out of our comfort zone as well, which has been really helpful.
Yeah. Were there any questions at all in terms of any questions you wanted to ask us about our experiences at all, or?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted, it's been great, especially the Twitter takeover, it's been brilliant.
We forgot to mention that, sorry.
Just in their spare time, they've been our social media department as well. But just to say, you guys are in second year at the minute of a 3-year undergraduate degree, and I think talking to you, that it almost surprises me, because your knowledge of what you're talking about is really high, so I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.